Boom, we're live. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It's Friday, March 11th, 2022. And this week, we're talking about the Apple event that happened on Tuesday because there's so many things to talk about. We're just going to jump right into it. I am your host, Luke Filipovich, writer for iMore, joined as always by my wonderful co-host, Karen Freeman, iMore contributor. How you doing, Karen?
Hi, good. How are you?
Not too bad. And our news editor at iMore, Stephen Warwick. How you doing, Stephen?
Hello, I am well, thank you.
And joined today by special guest, iMore writer, Brian Wolf. Thank you so much for joining us, Brian. We're happy to have you here.
You finally invited me.
It took a while, but we got him. Yeah, so we're just going to run through this event because, although the spring event sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap for being boring to some people, there was a decent amount of announcements that came out of this, and the event started right off with some Apple TV announcements, TV Plus, talking a lot about they kind of mentioned the nominations that films like Coda and The Tragedy of Macbeth got at the Academy Awards. Which has anyone here watched Coda yet? Because I actually think it's awesome. It's nominated for Best Picture and it's really good.
I haven't, but I've heard very good. Have you seen it? Yeah.
Yeah. I really, really loved it. And that was before I actually knew it was nominated. Like, I think before the nominations came out, I was just like, oh, hey, new Apple TV Plus movie. I'll throw this on a Friday night or whatever. And it was like really good. I was like blown away.
It's on my watch list.
Yeah. I definitely highly recommend it to everybody. It's a very, very good movie. But yeah, so they kind of started off with that. And then they teased a bunch of projects that are upcoming. With some very big Hollywood A-lister names involved. Things like Spirited, which looked like it had Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell, and it was sort of a take on A Christmas Carol. Maybe a bit of a funny take on The Christmas Carol. Luck was a new animated feature film that is going to be about luck, I'm assuming.
There was the unluckiest girl in the world, actually.
Right.
So,
but then she finds a lucky coin by the sounds of it. So we'll see how that. There was a talking cat who was walking on umbrellas. I thought that was cute. And then Argyle is like a spy thriller based on a book that's featuring like a bunch of stars. Notably, who they showed were Henry Cavill and Dua Lipa. Which, as someone who has major crushes on both those people, that's pretty much an automatic check. I mean,
how can you not?
What a dream!
How adorable are they?
Yeah,
that was like the thing I noticed watching it was like a big montage teaser trailer, and I was just thinking how many big A-list celebrity names they had. They just keep pumping them out. Like Ryan Reynolds was in there, I think, as well.
Tom
Dua Lipa, Henry Cavill, exactly. Yeah. It's just so cool.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like, if anyone's worried about Apple TV Plus going anywhere, it certainly seems like Apple has no plans for it to be going anywhere. Content will be coming out for that for the foreseeable future, I think.
Especially if you like sports.
Yeah. Stephen, why don't you tell us about the sports announcement that kind of was out of the outfield, you might say?
I think that's a baseball reference, but being British,
out of left field. The term is out of left field.
Left field.
But is left field a baseball thing? See, I don't know baseball either. That's why I said outfield.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay.
We've just lost our entire baseball. We've just lost our entire baseball listenership. In the first territory. Yeah, but yes, Apple has announced a brand new deal with Major League Baseball to stream, I believe, 2 live games every Friday on it's a new Apple TV Friday Night Baseball. 2 live games every Friday with its own exclusive pre-shows, post-game analysis, hosting, all of that good stuff. On-demand content, so you'll be able to just jump on Apple TV Plus and watch on-demand stuff. And then there's also a 24/7 like linear programming, so there will be studio shows and chat shows and classic games and throwbacks and highlights and all of this stuff. And it sounds like really quite a big investment. Apple's paying, I've reported something in the region of $87 million a year. Oh, and it's a 7-year deal, so that's almost like $600 million. There's a couple of opt-outs in the contract if it doesn't work out kind of the first or second year, But yes, this is a really exciting. We've heard a lot about Apple doing live sports in some capacity on TV Plus. We'd heard more probably about the NFL than baseball, but yeah, they finally cracked it, and there's going to be a baseball season too, which is also exciting for Apple's baseball deal.
Yeah, I liked how when they announced it, I was like, but baseball's not even happening right now. There's like a labor dispute, or and then of course, a day or two later, not saying Apple had anything to do with it, because I'm sure that they actually didn't. But hilariously enough, the baseball season has now been saved, as people like to put it. So is Brian or Karen, being the Americans, are either of you baseball fans or not? It's not really your thing.
No, but just being American growing up, I mean, I had to play baseball in gym class and stuff, so I know the basic terminology, but that's about the extent of it for me.
It just brings us closer to the football season once it begins.
It's a very slow-moving sport.
That's fair. I've always enjoyed. We have like a very small, in my city, we have a very small local baseball team. It's from like some really tiny minor league. I can't even remember what the league's called. But I enjoy going to the games. But like watching baseball is usually not really my thing. I feel like it is a little unexciting to me, especially since this big sport up here to watch is hockey. And hockey's very exciting sport, at least in my opinion. Lots of things going on. So, but it's cool that Apple's getting into sports, because we were talking about before the show started about how like it's kind of hard to watch sports without cable, especially as somebody who doesn't have cable. Like I find the lack of sports, easy access to any sort of real streaming that makes sense, is really, really hard because of all the local like blackouts that happen. Right. So like theoretically, if we're talking NHL, for me, I can, subscribe to NHL Center Ice. But I can't watch my own Winnipeg Jets hockey games because that's my local market and they want me to watch it on TV, but I don't have TV.
Same with baseball and the NFL, I think, across the US. And one of the interesting things with the Apple deal is it seems to be kind of free of any sort of local blackouts and such like that. So it's if you have Apple TV Plus, you can watch the game, I think, regardless of where you're situated, is certainly what I picked up from the press release. But yeah, you're right. It's a really fragmented, strange, weird kind of situation.
Yeah. So I think this is exciting for baseball fans, especially maybe people who are trying to cut the cord and finding it hard to cut the cord, because cable is still so dominant with sports. There's just like not really a lot of good streaming options for it. So I'm excited. I don't mind watching the occasional Toronto Blue Jays game, as that is our Canadian team. So we'll see how this goes. It's a lot of money for Apple to be dishing out. That's for sure. Sorry, Brian,
the one thing that's going to be interesting to see what teams actually we're going to see the most on the channel. Are we going to see the Yankees against Boston? Are we going to see some of the bigger competition, or are we going to see small market games? I think that remains to be seen.
Interesting.
Would you like to see other sports? Because I hope this is the start of something kind of new and exciting. And like we said, there have been talks about other sports. I personally would love to see the NFL on Apple TV. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I think the second rumor we've gotten this week is that they're seriously considering grabbing Sunday Ticket, which is currently on DirecTV in the US. That would be a complete game changer. That would probably cost extra than
probably a bit more than the baseball.
Yeah.
Well, because the NFL.
So I was just going to say, Phone Pop in the comments asked if the Apple content, the baseball is exclusive, and it is. Apple is getting exclusive.
Yes. There'll be some like classic games and stuff, and I guess in like highlights you can probably watch everywhere, but the live games that they show, the two every Friday, they'll be exclusive, and each will, like any sort of sports broadcast, there'll be a studio pre-show, post-game analysis, and that will all be exclusive to Apple. Yeah, so Apple hasn't bought the rights to somebody else's content. They are hosting their own So what they're licensing is the actual baseball, and they're creating everything to go around that. So yeah, really exciting, and I'm excited for what they'll do with other sports as a result of this.
Could be a game changer for Apple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting, kind of, Brian, what you said about the Sunday ticket, which if that is something that Apple goes out of its way to acquire, because correct me if I'm wrong, football fans, but like football only happens on select days, right? Like it's only like 3 days a week that there actually are games, and Sunday's like the biggest day, essentially.
Thursday, Sunday, Monday.
Thursday, Sunday, Monday,
Sunday's
right?
always the biggest.
Whereas like baseball is such a huge season with so many teams, they play like 160 games in a full season. Each team, like, they're playing every day, right? So having only one day where they're doing the broadcast, like, it is interesting what Brian will say, like, how many matchups are we going to see? Are we going to be able to see all the teams throughout the season, or are there just some teams that happen not to have Fridays on their schedule? I don't know. But
also really interesting as well, Sigmund, in the comments, when we talked about this before the show, this is going to be free for a limited period of time when it first kicks off, probably at the start of the season, so April 8th. Now the league has agreed a deal, so you don't actually have to have TV Plus to begin with in order to watch this. And I wonder if Apple is banking on a lot of people signing up for free baseball and either forgetting to cancel their subscription or actively setting out to stay with the platform once they've figured out, hey, baseball on Apple is pretty good. Because I have no interest in baseball, but I would definitely like to watch this to see what sport on Apple TV is like, just because it's the first time we've ever seen anything like this. So I think it will be quite a big draw of sports fans to the platform. And TV Plus is only $5 a month, so...
Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yes, that's exactly what Apple intends.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course, the only thing to look out for is if Apple continues to add, there was a while where maybe right at the beginning, $5 was a lot for Apple TV, or about right. And I think we're starting to maybe push past that, and could you see like price increases coming, or kind of add-ons or bolt-ons or stuff like that? Because if you start adding like the NFL, the NHL, like the English Premier League, for instance, like $5 is probably not going to cover that unless Apple is sort of. You're
probably going to start seeing different levels of subscriptions. Then you're going to like the all sports package and entertainment only package, stuff
Apple
like
TV
that.
Plus.
I agree.
Pro, Max, and Ultra.
Oh gosh.
keep the branding on point. Yeah.
And then at that point you'll get the people like me who's like, well, this is just like cable if I have to subscribe to all these different extra channels. And then the whole cycle starts all over again.
But we should probably move on to hardware, because we've got a lot to discuss.
That's true. There was quite a bit of hardware announced, and the actual first bit of hardware that they did announce was new iPhone colors for the iPhone 13 and the iPhone 13 Pro. Can anyone guess? Anyone in the chat who didn't watch? Just kidding. I'm sure everybody watched. Is green. They gave us green again. It's a very interesting dark green, though, especially on the iPhone 13 model. It's like I would describe it as like a hunter green. It's quite dark and deep.
Yeah.
Pretty
British
nice.
Racing green is the term I believe you're looking for, Luke. Oh,
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think like all the colors. I like all the colors that Apple gives us because I just like color. So for me, it was a win. The iPhone 13 Pro got an Alpine green color, which looks similar-ish to the midnight green that we got on the iPhone 11, but it's a bit lighter, I believe. It looks like it's a bit lighter. I haven't seen them in person yet.
As always, the pressed photos don't quite do these justice. We've just popped out on iMore because the first creators have got their hands on these today. There's lots of different videos of creators and photos going around of the new colors. Definitely check those out because it will give you a much better idea of what these look like in hand, in person. I found that with the blue of the iPhone 13 Pro, as I've said previously. So yeah, if you're thinking about buying it, or you just want to get a look, don't take the press photos at face value. Go and look in the real world, or visit an Apple store. But they're definitely two kind of distinct shades of green, and I really like them both. But I guess it begs the question, as Christine was asking on iMore, is this like unfair to people who buy the iPhone when it comes out and like a better color comes out 6 months later?
Yeah, I feel like Apple's sort of punishing early adopters, which isn't cool.
Yeah,
this is just.
Sorry, Brian, to cut you off, but I was going to say,
okay.
At the end of the day, the really what the mid cycle refresh of any phone that they ever do is really just to sell more, right? Like that's their goal. It gets the iPhone and the iPhone 13 back in the news. Cell phone retailers, whether that be your local Best Buy or even just your local cell phone providers that also sell you phones and plans, they can put up new displays that say they have the new iPhone, which is like not really new, but it is technically still new because it's the newest model. So it really obviously is a money play. I always like new colors, but it does feel a little weird that like if they know they're going to come out with this, because obviously they do. The planning's obviously been done so long ago. Why wait? Why not just launch them all?
I'm trying to think back to marketing. I think marketing 101 is that once a product's been around a while and you want to re-excite it, you come out with a new color or variants, or Dr. Pepper with cherry or whatever it is. So I don't think it matters what color it is. I think they probably have a lot of data to back up that once they come out with a new color, it brings more people into the stores, and they probably sell more of the other ones too.
Yeah, definitely. Right.
And it worked with the purple. They did it last year and they wouldn't have done it again if it hadn't. In fact, they doubled down because they did it last year with the purple iPhone 12, but there was only the iPhone 12. And this year is a new color for both the Pro and the regular. So yeah, like Brian said, they've obviously got insight and they know it's working. Yeah,
totally. And I mean, we always kind of, we always joke or say on the show that Apple doesn't give us enough Pro colors. So at least this is some way for new Pro colors to come to iPhone devices.
We got the Pro colors just at the wrong time. So
I still think so you can order those phones today. They hilariously enough, they won't come out until March 18th. Which I don't understand. I like St. Patrick's Day is a day before. Just make them come out the day before.
Oh, is that why? I saw so many people saying, "Oh, is it not the 17th?" And I was like, "Why would they do it on a third?" That makes sense now. Sorry, that's sheer ignorance from me. I don't cotton onto that at all.
I mean, obviously they're not going to change all their plans just because of a kind of like pseudo holiday celebration. But especially over here in the U.S. But over here, I'm not even in the US, but either way, point being over here in North America. But yeah, moving on, hilariously enough, they went on to talk about the A15 chip for a little bit before then getting into the meat of the announcement, which was there is now a new iPhone SE, as we were expecting. For a second there, they kind of made us think that they weren't going to talk about it because they were like, moving on from iPhone, let's talk about the A15 chip.
And specifically, they said moving on to Apple Silicon.
Yeah.
And then they went back to the iPhone, which it's a really boring bit of inside baseball, but they're referring to the iPhone chips now as Apple Silicon, where previously Apple Silicon was like specifically for the new Apple chips that were going in the Mac. Is kind of interesting. But yeah, that totally threw me. Like I was covering the event as it happened. Apple Silicon. I was like, cool, we're onto the Mac. I was like, there's a new iPhone SE.
I think what? all of us in the iMore Slack channel had a bit of a gasp when we were like, oh my goodness, is there no iPhone SE? That was the one we were all so sure about. Like everybody was so sure about it forever. But no, they did bring it back around to the iPhone SE because the A15 chip is now in the iPhone SE and it is the new processor as we were expecting, which means it has the same processor as your fancy iPhone 13 does, which is great.
And we could have waited, Luke. We could have waited on this one too. We could have waited a few months and spent a lot less money.
Yeah, that's true.
Luke is milking the A15 because there's nothing else exciting about this phone.
Yeah, I mean the
5G.
iPhone, as we've talked about before, the iPhone SE isn't really meant for us or even a lot of people. It's really meant for people who like the old form factor. They keep a lot of people do. When we've talked about this before, but potentially people who just aren't as tech inclined who go, need a new phone and they're like, I want one that's like the last one, but just better. This is an upgrade now. If you have an iPhone 7 or an 8 and you love the form factor, the iPhone SE3 is more powerful. It'll do you a little better. It'll last a little longer. And it has 5G capability.
And it does have better battery life, which supporting the A15 and 5G is quite impressive. But yeah, they renamed the colors, but the colors are the same as the old ones. Like, I just can't get myself going. It just...
Yeah, but ultimately, it's not for us, right? It's not a phone.
Yeah,
if
you watch the Apple event live, like, you probably don't buy the iPhone SE, I think, is the...
Yeah, but, don't you think they could put a little more thought into it? Throw those people a purple iPhone SE.
Bring back the 5C colors. That's what I wanted to see. What about do you think the price change? I know it's only $30.
That was annoying because it put it over the $400 threshold.
It is quite a strong, it's psychological marker, isn't it? Like, the difference between paying $399 and $429.
I was really surprised by that because I feel like that $399 price point is such a good sweet spot. Like, there's lots of more budget Android phones that fall around that $400 price point as well. And I mean, I've always been an advocate of, like, accessibility in tech is important, and part of accessibility is also affordability. So I don't like it when I see prices go up. I understand that there are business reasons as well as, the
Can I be a cynic?
Yeah, be a cynic. Do it.
The $30 is the baseball tax.
Everything goes up $30 so they can pay for MLB baseball Friday night.
No. But it does, like, it's a fair point. And Brian, I think you did some work on this on the site this week about how this pushes this up towards the existing iPhones that aren't the iPhone 13. So you're not just saying, oh, should I buy the iPhone SE or a cheap Android version? You're also thinking, do I push the boat out a little bit further and get the iPhone 11 or the iPhone 12, which are still really, really capable phones in a decent price bracket?
I did a quick analysis for my article, and I realized that, once you start adding some of the sales on the older phones, especially on the iPhone 12, you're really in the same ballpark, especially if you have an iPhone 8 and you turn it in, they're going to give you at least $150 for it. Mm. So you're already up to a 12. And on most points, the 12 is better than the new SE.
I suppose it's only if you desperately wanted Touch ID or the smaller form factor.
The smaller form factor, right? And there are people who love that, right? Like, I still kind of miss Touch ID. I just like how there's a few more uses where it's a little more useful than Face ID. For me, I've noticed it's not a big deal. I've pretty much adjusted, but we're all still hoping for that day where Touch ID and Face ID are on the iPhone in some capacity, whether that be like in the power button or side button, or if it just happened to be under the screen, which we've seen in some other Android phones and stuff. But the old form factor is definitely...
I would argue that the appeal of the home button is not so much the Touch ID, but the actual physical home button. I think that there are a number of folks, there are some in my family in the generation,
even though it's not technically, it's not a technical button anymore. It's when
I understand, but it's the muscle memory of
they provide the tactile response.
It's like an escape hatch.
Yeah,
like, I'm in this app and I don't want to be in it and I don't know how to get out of it, but I know if I just press this button, it'll just go back to normal.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing, Karen. You're right. Is that, like, there is some differences between how you use an iPhone with a home button and one that you don't. There are some UI, some user interface, and some user experience differences that I think, like, some people they don't need all the fancy stuff, and they don't want to learn. They don't want to learn the swiping actions or anything like that. It's not for them. They don't need it, right? And I think that's a huge part, because, like, how you use a phone and how you're used to using a phone is, like, a big part of why you buy a phone. It's what you're used to. It's why a lot of people will people who like using the newest iPhone every year will upgrade every year through whatever they want, or upgrade every 2 years, and they just kind of always go to the next iPhone because it's what they like. It's what they're used to. It's comfortable. They don't have to think about using their phone. It's not like there's any worry moments that they don't know how to do something. It's just, like, kind of automatic, right? We definitely have that in a lot. Some people have that in their brains. We're a bit habitual creatures like that, for sure.
Yeah. And frankly, my mom will buy a new phone based on whether it will fit her case, because she bought a
Totally.
custom case with like
Yeah.
her picture of her dogs on the back, and she will keep buying phones to fit in that case until she can't any longer. I'm not kidding you. That'll be the first question she'll ask. Will this phone fit in my case?
But yeah, I definitely think the two iPhones were the least exciting part of the whole.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The whole
Which
thing.
I mean, we were expecting, right? We didn't,
Yeah.
it's not like this is the new iPhone 14. We know that's coming in September. we know that's coming in September. We don't know. So when it comes to phones, we know that, nothing exciting is really going to happen until the fall. But something exciting that did happen was Apple did announce a brand new M1 chip, because they still are finding names that all mean the same thing almost to make it. But they announced the M1 Ultra, which, by standards of the other chips looks huge. It's like essentially sort of like two M1 Max chips that they like welded together.
Yeah, literally. It's actually kind of cool. It's a problem that chip makers have been trying to solve for ages. This kind of unified, like you take two chips and you create this unified architecture. It can share the memory and all that stuff. So yeah, it is literally double the size of the M1 Max.
Yes.
And yeah, the performance. Obviously, it's all relative, and I'm sure Apple is very selective about which chips and which applications it tests and benchmarks for rivals and competitors. So it can create those graphs where, Apple said we can deliver 90% of the same power that this Intel chip does, but using 100 watts less energy. Or we can deliver this graphics performance, but this, efficiency saving. But yeah, it looks pretty incredible, to be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely a technological feat, and like it's always just reminds me of how much it isn't for me. Like I am not a pro who needs something that powerful, in my devices. Like I have the M1 iMac and it is plenty powerful for me. It does everything I need to do, and I've never even seen it stutter when I've done anything. And like Brian, you have the M1 Pro in a MacBook Pro. And have you ever found that it's struggling at any point?
No, and I had the 13-inch MacBook Pro with just the M1, and the two differences, I guess there is technically a significant difference, but both of them are fast. But I'm not the one that looks into the benchmarks. It's fast. Period.
Yeah. The M1 Ultra looks really cool. It's apparently even better than the M1 Max. It's better than any chip we've ever seen before, according to Apple, of course.
It's better than the Mac Pro, the most powerful was the most powerful Mac that Apple sold, the Mac Pro. That it benchmarked is like 25% faster in the multi-core scores in the Ultra compared to the biggest Intel Xeon you could have got in a Mac Pro for like $2,000 more.
Yeah.
Mac Pro is an embarrassment at this point. And then we find out today we might not get the new one till next year.
Yeah, that's I'm very suspicious of that rumor. We could touch on that later if you want, but Apple, that was actually one of the things Apple teased, was like, oh hey, we've changed all of the Macs in our lineup except the Mac Pro, but that's for another time, which I think is probably the first time Apple has like hinted publicly that it is gonna upgrade a product or do something, which was pretty neat.
Yeah,
I think it proves that Apple loves the rumor mills and the rumor sites like ours, because they're totally stoking it by just tossing out that little gem at the end there.
Yeah, I mean, when they, at the very end of the event, they did mention that a Mac Pro was the last Mac that they have yet to sort of transfer over to their new their in-house chips, the M chips or whatever you want to call them, the Apple Silicon, and that's an interesting tidbit for them to throw out, because there are still some computers that maybe we thought we might get replacements for, but it sounds like the new computer that they did announce at the event is what they're trying to get people to buy. But before we talk about that, I'll give you a little bit of a break, and we'll let Karen tell us about some of our friends.
Yes. Have you ever hit a technical snafu shopping online? Has filling out payment field given you a headache? Has a mobile banking app even been down when you wanted to use it? Capital One believes everyone deserves better banking. This means easier access to their money and more security. That's why Capital One is investing in machine learning. Machine learning allows Capital One to do things like fight fraud with random forests. Models quickly detect suspicious activity and make it faster to alert federal investigators. Identify how mobile app outages happen with causal models. Keeping our mobile app up and running doesn't happen by accident. Anomaly detection and incident response help determine why app outages happen so engineers can quickly remedy them. Speed up online shopping with machine learning at the edge. Make shopping with virtual card numbers smoother and more secure. This technology is based on logistic regression models and running inference in the browser. It identifies payment fields, which helps make using virtual card numbers easier and faster. The potential of machine learning is so big. See how Capital One is using machine learning to create the future of banking. Search machine learning at Capital One. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Thank you, Karen. And thank you, Capital One, for sponsoring us. All right. So we heard a lot about the M1 Ultra. They talked about how powerful it was, how great the CPU performance was, how great the GPU performance was, how fast it was compared to various other devices or other chips. And then they throw us a brand new Mac called the Mac Studio, which kind of looks like two Mac Minis stacked on top of each other. It's a little box.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's a little box. It's like a little nice, cute little box. That's the same width and length. It's the same like square shape that the Mac Mini is, but it's much taller because there's obviously much more going on in it. And it has two configurations in terms of chips. It has a M1 Max, so you can get a version with an M1 Max chip or a version with the new M1 Ultra chip in it. This was an interesting announcement because it kind of I don't know. I don't know if we were necessarily expecting it. Like we'd sort of heard about, a Mac Mini that maybe had the M1 Pro or the M1 Max in it as sort of like a souped up Mac Mini, but we kind of got this, and it's the first really brand new Mac that Apple's launched in a while.
Yeah, we were actually expecting, we talked about it in the run up to the event. We'd heard so much more about M2, so like the second generation of Apple Silicon that wouldn't be as powerful probably as the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, but it may be more efficient. And then, yeah, all of a sudden was like, Apple said, hey, we made another chip and here's a brand new Mac. Because again, we were expecting M2 in like a boring MacBook Pro or like a MacBook Air. And yeah, the Mac Studio is completely different. It's funny, that extra real estate, the space is all cooling. Just to power the new chips, which I thought was pretty mental. It's good. Yeah,
I mean, once again, like this is not for me. I don't need an M1 Max. I don't need an M1 Ultra. I don't need to. The starting price of the lowest configuration is $2,000, and that's literally just for the computer, because you have to remember that
no display.
Yeah, this is an independent computer, right? There's no display. I was gonna say there's no speakers. Technically, there is one. It's very small and it's very, very bad.
I would love to hear the speakers on the.
I mean, the
Mac
M1, the Mac Mini also has a speaker. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to use it for anything, but it technically has a speaker. But it's a lot of money, and they really tried to aim it. They called it the Mac Studio, and they talked about how it's very useful for home studios and studio work. So they were very much trying to push it towards that more professional category, more of a pro audience, if you will. And I don't know. I'm just, what's convincing people to buy this and maybe not waiting for that Mac Pro?
It's strange, isn't it?
You think we're going to get one of those? You still think we're going to get one?
Possibly. Apple didn't allude to it, like the Mac Pro, but that's because there isn't a 27-inch Mac so they said specifically, they were very deliberate. They said the one thing we have left to replace is the Mac Pro.
Yeah.
But they've discontinued the 27-inch iMac. That's probably the most interesting thing, I think, about this whole Mac Studio announcement. So it comes with the Studio display, which I'm sure we can talk about as well. And Apple really deliberately throughout the event talked about this as being a direct replacement to the 27-inch iMac. And even if you look, I mean, just to give you an idea of the performance, Apple in the press release, it compares the performance directly to the 27-inch iMac. So even the M1 Max, which is the cheaper, lower config, 2.5 times faster CPU, 50% faster CPU performance than the Mac Pro with the Xeon, 3.4 times faster graphics than the 27-inch iMac, 7.5 times faster than the 27-inch iMac when encoding video. And that's not even the M1 Ultra, the spicier version, which is 3.8 times faster CPU performance, 60% faster performance than the 28-core Mac Pro. So this is a huge leap in performance. And at the same time, Apple very quietly discontinued the 27-inch iMac, but they're so different in price, especially when, like we said, you buy this Mac Studio, you also have to account for a display. And if you're using a Mac Studio that can power 16 streams of 8K ProRes video, you're going to need a very, very powerful display to go with that. So, like, in terms of pricing, it just doesn't add up really. But yeah, there's an awful lot going on.
That was my. Go on, Brian.
I was just going to say, Stephen, you're like an encyclopedia. It's just awesome that you know all this stuff.
I'm just reading it off the press release. Don't worry. It's because it comes with the Studio display, which is a 27-inch 5K. Sorry, it doesn't come with. It was announced alongside the 27-inch Studio display, 5K Retina display, and they were very much positioned as companion devices, although you could use either with both. Go on, Brian.
What do you guys think that, and I know the first thing Luke's going to say, but the price, and I agree, but maybe it does seem more like the 27-inch iMac if you as a buyer are going into it assuming you're also going to buy the very expensive monitor that they released at the same time.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's what it comes down. Like, I know Brian said I was just going to say this, but like, it's weird to me that they would discontinue the 27-inch iMac, because I think, first of all, I think that device has been around for 12 years. It's been around for a long time. It is a form factor and a size that a lot of people love. I feel like to me, at least, this is just observational, but it always seemed more popular than the 21.5 inch back when it was that. It seemed like that was the better one to get. It also was usually like about as powerful as the current MacBook Pro ish, which I suppose you can say that, like, I mean, the Mac Studio definitely is. It probably is even a little more so. But like, probably around $2,000 ish, if they gave us an all-in-one, is probably like the price you'd be looking for, like around there, maybe a little bit more or whatever. But this is $2,000 just for the computer. And then if you want that beautiful 27-inch 5K Retina display, which was already on the 27-inch iMac already, now you're paying an extra $1,600.
Yeah,
it is. The thing with the iMac that was so appealing is that if you compared it to the MacBook Pro, for the similar stats, you'd pay less, or for the same price, you get more power for your money. So,
but we're forgetting. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, but we are forgetting that there isn't a 21-inch iMac. They did increase the size to 24-inch, so maybe they just decided that's the happy medium.
Well, there is still a rumor that there will be a 27-inch iMac Pro. Well, we're hearing lots of different murmurings about WWDC and things coming later this year, or maybe even next year. So there are rumors still of a 27-inch iMac Pro, which would be a larger version of the current iMac, probably with one of these more powerful Apple Silicon chips. But we're also hearing that there might be a cheaper version of the Studio display, which again is exciting, I think. I don't know. It was definitely a surprise. It was one of those things we didn't really hear about the Mac Studio until very, very close to the event. We'd heard maybe last year that Apple had a Mac Pro planned that was half the size of the current model. And I wonder if this is maybe that, and that just got lost in the kind of translation. But I think it's really interesting because, like you said, with the price, it's no substitute, but also that form factor, having an all-in-one computer is really important to some people, especially with limited workspace or, trying to keep clutter to a minimum. It's a big difference having an all-in-one screen and a very large, because it is still a 27-inch display, and a desktop computer that is the size of the Mac Mini, but twice as high. It does make a difference to folks.
Yeah, it's hard. I know we still are hearing rumors about potential iMacs down the line, but it's just, they were pushing so hard in this event several times where they were comparing this specifically to the 27-inch iMac. And then they gave us that little nugget at the end where they said the only computer they have left to upgrade is the Mac Pro. And that, like, all that together really makes me wonder, like, maybe they're just done. Maybe they've decided to discontinue that, and they figure, the 24-inch iMac is going to be good enough for a lot of people who wanted that all-in-one anyways. And if you want the more power, and you want the really fancy display and you have the money for it, like, go with the Studio. I feel like, Steven said in the comments that it seems a much more reasonable entry, a replacement for the iMac Pro that's been discontinued for a while now. But that, that did start at around, I think, like 3,600, I believe, or something like that, which is about what this would start at if you bought both the Studio and the Studio Display, both the lowest configurations.
Yeah, they both make the two. They both make sense, kind of standalone. The Mac Studio and the iMac that we currently have. The problem is there's such a huge gap between the two of them. Like you said, like, you're either paying Luke, I don't know off the top of my head, what does the iMac retail at, the M1? What does that start around? Is it about 1,200, 1,300?
Yeah, I believe it's like around 1,200, 1,300 for the lowest configuration.
Huge gulf, not only in the price between that iMac and the next desktop Mac, which is now Mac Studio Plus display, but it's also a huge gulf in use case and form factor and, like, the power, the gulf, because there's no M1 Pro even in the middle. You have to go M1 or M1 Max or Ultra. So there's definitely, I think, a very big gap now in that Mac lineup, which makes me think that there is more to come in there. So whether that is a more powerful Mac Mini or a less powerful Mac Studio, or both of those plus a 27-inch iMac or an iMac Pro, there are so many ways Apple could go with that. I think it would work just fine.
So would we be satisfied with a update to the current iMac that includes more professional chips, maybe coming out,
or better? Yeah,
I was
display.
I was wondering about that. Like, maybe when we get around to getting, new iMac, like new 24-inch iMacs, when that happens, maybe next year or a couple of years from now or whenever it is, like, I mean, there is already two configurations, but it's not the chips that change. It's like the RAM inside and storage options and things like that. But do they go where they have like a 24-inch iMac with the M1 or maybe M2 at that point, and then a 24-inch iMac that has that upgraded, M1 Pro or M2 Pro, however they get there? And is that sort of how they kind of, replace the 27-inch iMac in a more direct way? Even though I think, going down, it's only 3 inches. It sounds like 3 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're using it and you actually have it in front of you, 3 inches is a lot more space on a screen.
Yeah,
it does come down. It comes down to the popularity, though. Maybe just the 27-inch was not as popular as we maybe think it was.
Yeah, and that's what I'm wondering about, because it's a product that's been around for 12 years. Like, to me, it always seemed like the more popular model back before the M1 iMac. It always seemed like the more popular model than compared to the 21.5 inch. And it seemed like it did fit that interesting niche where, like, it was a little less expensive than the MacBook Pro, but like more or less around the same stats. And like it now we just kind of don't quite have that in the lineup in a price point that that I think makes a lot of sense for people who are maybe looking to upgrade their 27-inch iMacs. I'm sure there's a decent amount of people who have been waiting for, the direct replacement, especially after the 24-inch iMac came out. And it's like, oh, okay, now we have like a new nice iMac, and now we can build on that. And I think I think there are a subset of people, and myself included, who are kind of expecting that. And now it's, who knows? Like they really pushed this Mac Studio on people who wanted that 27-inch screen because of the Studio Display, which to dive in a little further to that, is also a bit of an interesting product. Like, yes, it's expensive, but at the same time, it's a really good screen. I don't know if anyone's used Apple screens lately. They're quite incredible. Like it's a little better than the screen that's on my 24-inch iMac right now, but this 24-inch iMac screen is the best screen I've ever used. It's really, really awesome. It's insanely sharp. This is only 4.5K rather than 5K that the Studio Display would be, and obviously it's only 24 inches. But like, I don't actually think the price for the display is all that outrageous. It's obviously a bit higher than you can get some comparable things for a little less, but for the quality of the display, I actually don't think 1600's too insane. Obviously, it's, for people who are not looking to spend that much, there's lots of other options out there. But
especially when you pair it with the iPad Air instead of a Mac Studio or something like that, because the new iPad Air will power the whole display, or even the Pro Display XDR. So
yeah. So one thing we haven't really talked about is who the target audience is for the Studio, and I think it's actually going to be a pretty small audience. And when we say that it's aimed at professionals or it's aimed at pros, we're talking about a very specific kind of professional, not professional tech writers like us, not professional people who work in an office and wear suits, executives or lawyers or whatever, not even professional like software developers. I think it's specifically aimed at creators, photographers, videographers, graphic artists, people who use extremely and have extremely intense computational workloads, shall we say. So I think it's a pretty
music
small
too.
market.
Yeah.
Music, absolutely. Music, film, all those kinds of things.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder, like, where's the niche inside that market already that might be being served by, more of a Mac Pro type device, right? Because, and it makes you, I agree. It seems like a small sliver. I don't know. And it seems like they're trying to be like, by offering the M1 Max version and the M1 Ultra version, it kind of seems like they're trying to be like, they're trying to sort of fit it into a bigger hole than I think it actually fills. I don't know. So it's an interesting choice.
So we're, I guess, leaning towards that there is something out there between the 24-inch iMac and the current Mac Studio.
Yeah, there has to be. Like, it just doesn't make any sense with the price gap, the form factor difference, and I think the processing as well. There's just too big a hole there not to be.
Yeah.
Are we gonna talk about another Apple product they might have almost killed last week? The 11-inch iPad Pro.
Yeah, I just realized that we kind of skipped over the iPad Air in this entire discussion. So we're going to bounce back a little bit. Before they started talking about the Mac Studio and Studio Display, they did launch the iPad Air 5 finally, which has gone, like, I guess it's been 2 years roughly since the last refresh, about a year and a half, I guess, since it was late 2020 when the iPad Air 4 was announced. And there's not a ton of differences, but the biggest difference to what Brian's alluding to is it has an M1 chip inside of it, which was very surprising.
One surprising thing,
because we'd heard A15 and 5G, much like the iPhone SE, and A15 made sense because the last one got the A13 chip,
which
like the iPhone,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden they were like, oh yeah, here's the M1 chip, and now you're thinking, well, this does almost everything, if not everything, the 11-inch iPad Pro. I can't think of a single.
Well, now it's like the
Face
only
vision and LiDAR are still missing.
The only thing that separates essentially the iPad Air 5 and like the 11-inch iPad Pro is ProMotion, which, don't get me wrong, is very great. and like light and the LiDAR and the and the camera array.
Face ID too.
And Face ID, right? There is Touch ID on the
which
iPad
is, and that's debatable whether that's better or worse than Touch ID.
Yeah, that's more of a personal preference almost at this point, to be honest. So, to me, Brian was alluding to this, but like Brian, do you think that they maybe when they go to refresh the iPad Pro, they're getting rid of the 11-inch?
You know, I'm starting to, whatever we're talking about, I'm starting to think the whatever the number is, M1 and 2, that is eventually going to be the consumer side of a product, whereas the M1 Pro, Max, Ultra is going to be the Pro side. So I guess to answer your question, I don't see the need for an 11-inch iPad Pro after this year. I make the Pro the 12.9 inch and go from there, I guess. Who knows? I mean, that was a surprise how close they are.
Yeah. The other thing I'd say is there is a rumor that the next 11-inch iPad Pro will get the mini LED display like the big one, and possibly, and I think they're going to refresh both iPad Pros with an M2 chip, maybe. So I don't necessarily think they're going to like just kill the 11-inch iPad Pro, but there is a glaring need to update that device very soon, because like you said, there is just no reason why you would pick the 11-inch Pro over the Air. Now it's got the M1 chip. It's got a new front-facing camera, 12 megapixels. It's got 5G. So yeah, I think it's brilliant. It's it didn't change in price either, did it? I think it's the same price as the old one, which is good because the last one got a hefty price increase because it was a very significant upgrade. So.
Yeah. I wonder where the iPhone 11-inch, the iPad Pro 11-inch. I wonder. I see both ways, right? Like obviously that they went with the two sizes because like 12.9 inches, like once again, we're talking about an inch, like pretty much 2 inches, but like it's really different when you hold them. Like a 12.9 inch iPad is very hefty. And the 11 inch is a bit less so and a little more easy to kind of carry around. And
it's a big difference in an iPad.
Yeah, it is very big difference in an iPad. So like, I can kind of see it going a bit both ways. Like there's a chance that maybe they just want to switch down to one model with the iPad Pro and then include maybe just like even more features to make it even better. So there is more of a stark difference. But there might be enough fans of the 11-inch iPad Pro. It might have enough sales that like they're just going to keep it around and just they'll upgrade that, and then we'll go through this constant upgrade cycle where every couple of years they'll be close for a little while, but then the new versions will come out and they'll be less close. So it's interesting to see what happens going forward.
The Air is such an interesting product in its history. I mean, at one point we thought they killed the Air, and then it came back, and the fourth generation just wowed us all. And then the fifth is just building on that. But it's an interesting product, the Air.
Great colors too. I'm just looking at the purple is nice. But there's like what is that? Like a bluey. It's a funny shade of blue that also looks really interesting. I just love the way they keep the Air more colorful. I think the new purple absolutely pops. Really interesting as well, the new USB-C port, which is like the Pro, so it's twice as fast as the previous one, which is what I was saying earlier. So you could get an iPad Pro and you could plug it into the studio display, and you could run the studio display with your iPad, which I think is again, why would you buy the 11-inch iPad Pro at this point with all of those features?
Yeah, it's an interesting case. We'll have to see what happens. I'm very curious now for the iPad Pro announcement, even though because I probably won't buy an iPad Pro. It's not really what I need in a tablet, but like now I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Like, are we going to see a big shakeup, or how different is it going to be? So that's an interesting thing. And the Air, by all means, like we had named kind of the iPad Air 4 at iMore. We had named it sort of the best iPad kind of all round for everyone. And like, it seems like obviously we got to get one and test it out and do all that stuff. But like, it seems like the iPad Air 5 is going to easily take that crown again.
Especially at the same price point. I think
when it comes to balance between performance and price, I feel like it's right. It's competitive. It's right in that spot. It just offers so much for a decent price point. And I mean, there still is the cheaper iPad for people who just need an iPad for more basic uses, right?
I do think as well, we don't have to, I'm conscious of time, so we'll not discuss it, but like when they put the M1 in the iPad Pro, and everybody said, well, what's the point? Because iPadOS really can't make that much use of it.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it with the Air as well, I think we're at a really clear stage now where iPadOS needs to improve significantly so that people can make more use of this. There's no point putting the M1 chip inside the iPad Air if it's just to run, like, swap between Netflix and emails and the occasional spreadsheet. There needs to be real-term gains in terms of what kind of pro-intensive apps that you can. But we've been saying that for years, so maybe not.
And Stephen points out in the comments that the Air is actually just USB-C or USB 3.1, whereas Thunderbolt is on iPad Pro. So the iPad Pro can take advantage of that.
Oh, of course. Did I say they were the same? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's
brain
fog. The iPad Pro still can take advantage of that 40 gigabyte per second data transfer speed.
Yeah.
So whereas the iPad Air would just be 10 gigabytes at most.
Yeah, the iPad Air can even run the 6K, the Pro Display XDR, if you really wanted it to, which is
I'm not sure why you would want it to, but
it's such a strange combination.
It's certainly out there.
There's a $200 price difference between the Air and the Pro. Is that correct?
That sounds
yes.
Yeah.
So
should we go around the room and say our favorite?
Before we kind of sign off here, let's just do a little bit of a round table. What's the thing you're most excited for, and what's the thing you're maybe least excited for out of this announcement? It can be a new product, it can be a direction Apple seems to be going, it can be kind of whatever. I'll open up the floor. Brian, we'll start with you. You're a special guest.
I mean, I think that out of all of them, the Mac Studio, I think we're going to look back at this announcement on the Mac Studio and say, oh, look, this is the first of so many different Macs that they released. I think in its present form, because there's such a split between the existing iMac and that, it is definitely priced at a point that most people aren't going to like it. But good for Apple to basically surprise us until the weekend before with this new product. So that was the best thing.
Is there something you're not looking like? Is there something you don't care about? Do you think it was like, what was the least interesting? I think everyone's going to say the same thing, but
I don't know. I again, I'm reminded this stuff isn't for us. For me, the regular iPad isn't for me, and the regular or the iPhone SE. I just wish they'd get rid of the Touch ID, but again, it's not for me. So I'm glad those folks have a new SE.
Mm-hmm. Karen, you're next. How about you?
So I actually think the M1 Ultra is going to be sort of looked back on as the biggest leap technologically. So that was exciting. For me personally, I don't need that much power. So I'm not in the market for an iPad right now, but if I was, that iPad Air would definitely be on my very high on my list. That the purple, the blue, just gorgeous colors. All the colors are gorgeous, all of them. The thing I'm least excited about, honestly, those greens. I don't think the green iPhones are pretty at all. They are the ugliest shade of green, I think, in the entire gamut of green. I'll just say that.
All right, there we go. Stephen, what's your most excited?
So most excited for sports on Apple TV Plus, not baseball. Baseball stinks, but Apple TV Plus sports. I am so excited for that. I can't wait to see. There are so many opportunities with the hardware and all that Apple can do to create incredible sports viewing experiences. So I hope baseball is just the start of that. I'm really excited for that. Least exciting thing, I think, for me was the iPhone SE. Brian, in the comments, you're looking, would it be worth an upgrade from the iPhone XS? It depends. If you like the XS, which is doesn't have Touch ID and the swipe, move into the iPhone SE. You probably feel like a step back going to a physical Touch ID button. If you miss Touch ID, then definitely it would be an upgrade, because the internals of the iPhone SE, you would notice an improvement over your XS. But for me, and I think, like you said, for a lot of us, the iPhone SE, for me, it just doesn't do it.
Yeah, and I think my favorite announcement, the thing I'm most excited for, is the iPad Air 5. I think
which is funny because you forgot about it during the whole show.
I did. I forgot about it during the whole show. I just wanted to save the best for last, maybe.
Yeah.
I think, as somebody who I have an iPad, like last year's regular base iPad, and I use it quite a bit, and it does pretty much everything I needed to do, except for it's not quite as good when it comes to like editing photos. It's not horrible. It's not horribly, like, I can do it. It's not like disastrous or anything. But if I want to do some really heavy editing in some of my favorite apps, it does it's not the best. And then I usually switch to my iMac and get it done on my iMac rather than that. But I like when I take my photos, I like being able to be on the go. So I think the iPad Air 5 might be the one to get me up there. I might want that M1 chip. And I think the least exciting wasn't an announcement. It's like, I'm still kind of shocked at the 27-inch iMac just like disappearing and not really being replaced. What I see as a suitable replacement, if anybody's been like looking for that. But who knows? Who knows what will happen in the future with that? We have no idea. There might be some sort of new iMac eventually. Apple might just be teasing us by saying the only computer they have left is the Mac Pro. Maybe they're just trying to get some outrage. I don't know. But that is our show. I want to thank everybody for listening. Anybody who's watching us live, we love our live listeners. Thanks for commenting and going on this journey with us. Obviously, if you're not listening live and you're listening in your podcatcher of choice, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. If you have comments about any of the new products, tweet us at iMore. Let us know what you think about the Mac Studio, the iPad Air, the iPhone SE, the green colors that Karen hates. Let us know what you think. And until next time, we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.